Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Within the Boggart podcast. Today's episode format will be a little different to normal and will form the trial run for investigation episodes, so please do let me know your thoughts on it. For those listeners not following online discussions, I've been working on trying to find the best online community platform for Within the Boggart Wood. I've discovered that for the average episode, meta-based social media, i.e. Facebook and Instagram, only seem to inform 27% of group members or followers of any new posts. I did trial an old-style forum, but no one was interested in partaking, so I've decided to grow the community element of the project on Patreon. I know a lot of people are put off Patreon due to cost, but the platform has launched a free membership option as well as the paid tiers, so that's now not an issue. I will still keep the current social media channels and will be looking further into the Mastodon platform, but please check out the Within the Boggart Patreon page. Once this episode is live, I'll put a discussion thread on there for free members to see how it goes, as well as some video which will go into the Court of Boggart's £3 a month subscriber tier. I've also been asked to start uploading the podcast episodes to YouTube. I've trialled episode 1 already, and I'll be starting to try and catch up with the rest of the episodes. I'll put links to Patreon and YouTube in the episode description. And so, moving on to the episode itself, and without further ado, the Boggart investigates Queen Street Masonic Temple, Sunderland. In the year 1785, Queen Street, lying south of Old Sunderland High Street East, saw a grand new addition built. That area of Sunderland at the end of the 18th century was dominated by a large market, inns, industry and densely populated tenements. A tenement was a house or building which was rented or leased as homes to more than 3 families living independently in the building, with common rights to halls, stairs, privies and external toilets known as water closets. The lodge, labelled as such on Rain's map of Sunderland dated to the 1790s, was built by Freemasons as a purpose-built temple to replace their previous building which had burned down in 1783 on Vine Street. The Vine Street Brethren were named King George's Lodge and raised £600 through subscription, shares and donations for the construction of the hall, and by April 1784 the lodge had been renamed Phoenix Lodge. So in 1785, Phoenix Hall was built at the southern extent of the Golden Lion Inn complex. The inn complex comprised the main inn building, with outbuildings including stables, a malt house and coach houses. It even had its own bowling green and was classed as one of the premier inns of Sunderland at the time. The thing to remember here is that this area of Sunderland at the end of the 18th century lay at the centre of Sunderland rather than being the East End we know now. The inn and the new hall would have been set in a bustling commercial centre. The new hall was built by local architect and Freemason John Bonner, with the foundation stone laid on the 5th of August 1784. For his work on the hall, Bonner was paid what was then a hefty sum of £296. The completed building was consecrated on the 5th of April 1785. Originally the building comprised a central temple room with a small room set to both the east and west. As far as historic records suggest, the hall was built on the central section of the inn's bowling green, with the northern extent sold to a Joseph and Elizabeth Smith, described at the time as a building plot bordering Queen Street to the east and waste ground belonging to the inn to the west and south. The southern extent of the bowling green was laid aside to become Middle Street. A report on the property produced by Historic England suggests that the new hall may have been built on the site of an older structure. Examination of the fabric of the basement level noted that one of the walls was over 1 metre thick, with the ground floor wall built on it being much narrower. A further piece of masonry lying in the north wall under the temple is also of interest. Within the temple itself are 2 fireplaces, and there are pillars of masonry in the basement acting as supports for these. The section of wall of interest lies between the 2 pillars, with visible straight joints suggesting that the pillars were added later, making the wall older. The report suggests that this may be evidence of an early 18th or even late 17th century building occupying the space before the hall. The wall section between the pillars was also noted to contain 2 blocked windows and a blocked door, suggesting that, to quote, "The windows and steps may suggest a domestic or storage function. Stabling would require a more level entry." Historic England are, however, very careful to point out that these features are only potentially evidence of an earlier building. The features of interest could, however, simply be indicative that when the cellar was originally built, the pillars supporting the fireplaces above were simply added after the cellar floor plan had been completed, and the metre-thick section of cellar basement wall previously noted was built as strong insulation and support for the cellar, with the ground floor wall simply not needing to be as thick as it wasn't underground and under pressure. Certainly in 1999 there was a small archaeological evaluation undertaken in the floor of the basement, recovering 18th and 19th century pottery as well as a stone flag drain, or known locally as a kundi, dating to the same period. So, going back to 1785, historical documents show that William Irvine, then owner of the Golden Lion Inn, was allowed to use the basement as a cellar for the inn for just a rent of £2 a year. Access would have been externally, likely through the block door just mentioned, showing that the opening was likely in use in 1785, and more than likely part of the original build. In 1785, it was also agreed that a local music society could hire a room in the hall for 10 guineas a year. In 1810, the lodge agreed to lease the eastern side rooms to the town watch for £6 per year rent. The western side room was rented as a private residence to the lodge Tyler, free of rent in that same year. The Tyler is an officer in a lodge who guards the door of the temple during a lodge meeting, so I do wonder if there's a method of the lodge keeping an eye on the members of the watch. In 1831, disaster struck Sunderland when an outbreak of cholera hit, the first in Britain. The outbreak was part of a pandemic which rose in India in 1817 and travelled through trade routes across Asia, China, Japan and Russia, and from Russia it then spread into Europe. This was a different disease to what was often referred to as cholera in Britain at the time. The cholera the country knew is now commonly referred to as gastroenteritis, involving food poisoning or dysentery. Once this new, more deadly form of cholera spread to Hamburg and Germany, the Privy Council of Britain reconstituted the Central Board of Health, who set up quarantine of all ships arriving from the Baltic ports. But in Sunderland this quarantine failed, with the first death reported on the 23rd of October 1831. Now, unlike what you may have heard or read from various sources within the paranormal community, this cholera didn't wipe out thousands of Sunderland residents. The death toll in Sunderland was 215, but the disease did run rampant throughout the country, resulting in 32,000 deaths across Britain by the end of 1832. When the pandemic eased though, pretty much nothing was done to prevent its reoccurrence. Cholera then returned to Britain in 1848 and took another 62,000 people during the following 2 years. It's pretty likely that the Public Health Act of 1848 was passed due to the perceived negligence. But I digress, so back to the Masonic Hall. Gas lighting was added to the hall in 1841, but by 1870 there was some discussion over the state of the building as the lodge pondered moving out to a new hall being built north of the river at Park Terrace. The move in the end didn't occur, but instead the decision was made to extend the hall. A banqueting hall and kitchen were built sometime around 1894, and extended north and replacing tenements that had been built onto the northern side of the hall. The kitchen was set at basement level and had an external cart entrance, now blocked. This blocked entrance has caused some confusion in the past, with even the hall's own website stating that the extension was originally part of the Golden Lion's 18th century stable block. But in this case the phasing and layout clearly show that it was simply part of the late 19th century extension works, not also forgetting the parcel of land sold to the Smiths in 1785, describing the area as waste ground, not stables. In 1898, the temple interior was also renovated and decorated. Fast forward to 1923, when work once again started on the hall. 2 buildings adjoining the north wall of the temple at the time were demolished, along with the original western side room. A new entrance hall with a corridor and toilets was then constructed, along with a new corridor linking the banqueting hall with the temple, and a committee room over at first floor height. In the 1990s, a new breeze block extension was added to the banqueting hall, and the northern end of the hall was repaired and made sound after buildings adjoining to the north collapsed. So now, moving on to the ghost lore surrounding the Masonic Temple. As well as delving into the history and attending a ghost hunt at the hall, I've also been trying to collate the ghost stories being told and written about the place. The Masonic Hall is indeed one of those locations that doesn't really appear on the paranormal radar basically until paranormal entertainment groups began holding events there. I've scoured old newspapers, journals, the usual folklore and history books, as well as courses of the interweb, but have not been able to find any sources predating 2018. I have, however, found mentions online of bar staff experiencing shoulder taps, hair pulls, and also seeing a shadowy figure in the cellar, though no dates are really put to these witness statements. One website states that both staff and visitors have heard whispered conversations and seen an apparition in full Masonic regalia gliding through the main hall and disappearing through the wall, as well as a misty form materialising on the grand staircase, and disembodied chanting of a Masonic ritual in an empty room. However, this website appears to be a little mixed up, as the hall doesn't actually have a grand staircase. The website also states that the hall was built in 1932, and of course the simple fact that Masonic rituals aren't chanted, they're recited. So someone in this case has their locations and history mixed up with a hint of storytelling fantasy, and with further research showing that this particular website appears to be mixing up the Queen Street Lodge in Sunderland with that in London, it's difficult to take any witness testimony written on it at face value. There also seems to be a big push by many paranormal groups to try and enhance the ghost lore of the place by citing the history of the area before the hall was built, with stories of medieval plague victims, or the claim that the hall was built in a medieval house, a stable, a manor house, or even a church depending on the source. The reality is that the area of Queen Street and the Masonic Hall lie within a series of medieval burgage plots, facing onto what became High Street East. Burgage plots were long strips of land, usually with a house with a narrow street frontage, so in this case, the house had been located against the High Street East frontage, later to be replaced by the Golden Lion public house, with the area of the plot where the hall was built being where you'd expect to find cess and refuse pits. This would explain 2 sherds of 14th century pottery and a potential medieval shoe found in the 1999 test pitting in the basement of the hall. Archaeologically and historically speaking, there's no evidence that the temple was built over a medieval house, church or anything else. This story has probably been developed from the presence of the thick piece of stone wall described previously in the podcast, which one researcher said was potentially medieval due to its thickness, while the evidence to date simply suggests that it was likely to be simply the first phase of building the hall. And also, despite what some may claim, and mentioning of course no names here, I have to say, there are no known plague pits in the vicinity of the Masonic Hall. Some have also tried to link hauntings in the hall with cholera victims, citing a mass grave found in the 1980s that for years folk thought held cholera victims. However, the reality is that the grave was found during a road scheme in 1988 and uncovered 100 people in a mass grave in the former High Street Cemetery. The grave did not actually contain cholera victims and was located nearly a mile away from the hall. So again, this is pure storytelling, grabbing at elements of half-baked history in the area. Then there's story of witchcraft being linked to the hall. Unfortunately, the source for this is actually Sunderland University, and a university blog entitled East End and Old Sunderland. In it, the blog states that the timber joists in the cellar were taken from local shipyards and hold witches' marks, claimed to be carved to protect the ships from evil. However, unfortunately, this is wrong, with the actual explanation far more prosaic. Records suggest that John Bonner, the architect of the hall, was also a timber merchant. The timber was often sourced from the continent and in particular the Baltic regions, which of course later proved to be problematic due to the trade routes spreading cholera. The marks carved into the wood aren't witch marks. They are simply what is referred to as Baltic shipping marks, carvings in the wood representing source and grade of timber used. So rather than evidence of protection from witchcraft, they're actually historical evidence of the European timber trade in the late 18th century. So I'm afraid it can be very simply stated in this case that those reports of paranormal activity linked to the witchcraft of the symbols simply resides in the imaginations of those experiencing it. And to my mind, it does seem a shame that the rather fantastic real social history of the buildings gets sidelined for a more fantasy horror film approach when it comes to the ghost lore of the place. After all, for those who believe that ghostly phenomena derives from past human activity on the site, there's no need to make anything up. The real history is there already. From the more urban legend or mythical elements of the ghost lore, I then decided to look at what people on ghost hunts in the building have reported. Now again, it's difficult to take a lot of the attendee statements as read, simply as if you go on one of these events, you're already psychologically primed to see, hear or feel something untoward. Quite normal occurrences can suddenly become spooky, especially in the dark, wandering an historic building with torches. There also comes the issue of many folk attending these events simply not being aware of perfectly natural elements at play. For example, feeling something touching your neck while standing in a through draft, or noting a cold spot in a cellar, not realising that the spot you're standing in is actually a blocked up doorway. Knowledge of equipment and how it works is also a problem. For example, as part of the research for this podcast, I watched one online investigation where someone was, for want of a better term, freaking out while filming in a mirror in the hall. The lens flare and refraction in the mirror, perfectly normal phenomena, were interpreted by the people looking through the camera as being able to see an apparition. To them, it was a figure made out of light, but the reality was that the image was simply caused by lights in the mirror. I've discussed this with a few folk, one of whom pointed out that the shimmering shape in the mirror seemed to move. This is simply because the camera shifted angle. It was handheld, not at a tripod, and thus the shape appeared to move as the camera did. So, moving away from the mirror, let's look at the other phenomena reported at the site. Number 1. Voices coming from an empty basement. Number 2. Feelings of being touched around the neck and shoulders in the basement. Number 3. Wet footprints appearing on the floor when it hadn't rained for several days. Number 4. A dark figure in the corner. Number 5. The sounds of children singing. Number 6. Unexplained bangs. Number 7. The apparition of a man in Victorian clothing. Number 8. A feeling of unease in the basement. Number 9. Sudden nausea in the basement. Number 10. Feelings of being watched. And number 11. Shadow figures in the basement. Objectively speaking, none of these phenomena can actually be confirmed or debunked unless the person doing the debunking or confirming actually experiences them. I can, however, suggest potential sources for some of them though, but I do stand by my statement that if you've not experienced the phenomena, you can't categorically debunk it. My suggestion for explanations on the voices from the empty basement could be the simple fact that the basement has ventilation vents at the south and west walls, as well as one on the far east wall by the stairs into the basement. These voices could simply have been sound travelling from the surrounding area. The vents are also likely causes for cold spots and the feeling of being touched down the neck and shoulders, and even feelings of hair being touched or moved in the air through flow. For the children singing, I wasn't able to locate where the singing has actually been heard in my research. Thing to remember though, the hall isn't standing in glorious isolation. It's in the middle of Sunderland's East End, with streets and housing including high-rise flats all around. The feelings of sickness and unease in the basement level seem to have only been expressed by investigators on the site, and the likely cause is that the basement is very dark, with a low ceiling and a packed earth floor. Some of the archaeological evaluation pits are still open as well, and there's the feeling that if you're standing in the dark, you'd better watch your step. It could be argued that feelings of unease could simply come from psychological priming in a relatively enclosed space, with the potential you can fall into a pit if you take the wrong step. The wet footprints are harder to explain, unless of course there'd been water elsewhere on the floor of the hall, such as the kitchen, and someone had simply walked through it unawares. Unexplained bangs, taps and groans occur naturally in a building as it settles or shifts with changing temperature and humidity, especially one set over a nice cool cellar. The apparitions and shadow figures, however, again without seeing them myself, cannot be explained absolutely, but a lot could be down to psychological priming, and for that I'll give you an example shortly. As some listeners will know, I'm an archaeologist of over 30 years experience, with a fair amount of the last decade dealing with historic building recording, and to be honest, the Masonic Hall in Sunderland is somewhere I've wanted to have a mooch around for some time. The building is now a Grade 1 listed building, meaning that it is of exceptional national architectural and historical importance. Obviously the recent reports of alleged paranormal activity have added to that, so when the opportunity came I jumped at the chance. I attended a fundraising event at the hall, hosted by Mark Smith on behalf of his son, Elliot Smith, who was hoping to raise £5,000 to allow him to undertake an expedition to Peru in 2025. The 4-week expedition will include community, environmental and conservation work, as well as a trek to Machu Picchu. For those who want to know more, or who may wish to donate, I'll put the GoFundMe link in the episode description. So, on the night of the 29th of June, I went along to the ghost hunt, not really knowing what to expect, as it's been years since I've been to an entertainment-based ghost hunt rather than a serious research paranormal investigation. A good friend and supporter of this podcast, Andy Ross from Walking with the Ghosts of Durham, also attended, so at least there was somebody there I actually knew. The night was run by local paranormal author Steve Watson and his group Ghost Northeast, and Steve started off by checking that everyone was happy with appearing online and then explaining what we'd be doing.
So what we're going to do tonight, we're going on a ghost hunt, a paranormal investigation, a ghost search, spirit, whatever it is what they call it. I'm just going to call it the ghost hunt because that's what I call it. Okay, what we're going to do is we'll start shortly walk, we're going to go into the temple, and we'll start with a call out. This is what it says on the tin, all with together. I'll start the night with a blessing. A blessing isn't, I don't use God, I don't use religion, it is all about purity and light. It takes a minute, if you believe in it, it's meant to come in with energy that protects you from anything bad, nasty or horrible trying to hurt you tonight. It's a belief system. You don't believe in it, it's a load of crap. Just stand for a minute and respect everybody around you. If you do believe in it, or you want to try it, listen, I'll talk you through it. After that, we'll start with a call out. See if we get a bit of energy, see if we get a bit of activity going, see how it turns out. After that, I'll split you up in two, or I think Mox will split you up into two groups, and then you'll go around the building separately. If you hear somebody has gone or done something that you haven't, don't panic, you will get there. You all do exactly the same thing, you all will go around the building. When you're in the location, silver boxes like this, exactly like this, there for you to play with. There's loads of gadgets and gizmos in there for you to get your hands dirty with. The guys will tell you what they're for, what we're trying to achieve and why we use them. But they are for use to play with, not for us, for use. In each location we have an experiment that we've tried and tested before to have a go. Only do what you feel comfortable with doing.
As described by Steve in that clip, each location within the building contained a case of equipment containing dowsing rods, dowsing pendulum, EMF meters, ghost boxes and other bits of kit. In theory, it was up to us as a group what equipment would be used in each location over the night, supervised by one or two of Steve's team. To start with, we all went into the temple where Steve asked us to form a circle, everyone holding hands with the lights turned off. He then recited a non-denomination blessing of protection, before standing a good while in the dark simply listening and calling out for spirits present to make themselves known. The silence occasionally marked by a stomach rumble, which for once wasn't me. With the lights off in the temple, it was interesting that after a few minutes, the faint light coming through the cracks in the door allowed natural night vision to kick in, and I could soon see the checkered floor pattern in front of me. Now, as a person past the age of 50, currently suffering with tendinitis in one leg and general aches and pains from digging out in all weathers for 30 years, standing perfectly still just isn't easy for me. Holding hands with folk to either side does inhibit movement somewhat, but after a few minutes I had to stretch my back and roll my head a little to try and prevent a large pop coming from my neck. At that point, one of the team members announced that she'd seen a shadow move in front of her. I asked initially if she'd seen it against the floor, but she didn't seem to understand the question. A few more minutes passed, and I had to move my head and shoulders again, and again the shadow was seen. So I do think the phenomena was likely the movement of my own shadow on the floor, almost imperceptibly cast by the faint light from the cracks around the door. Of course, this can't be proven one way or another. Looking purely at it from a psychological view though, it can be seen that this boosted the process of all those present being mentally primed to expect something to be moving around in the dark. With that, the group split up. The team I was in started in the banqueting hall, and they decided that they'd start with the family favourite known as the Ouija board. I opted to film the proceedings, as from my point of view, even on an entertainment event, if there's no visual record of what occurs, then there's no proof of anything happening apart from in the eye of the beholder. Now, it's no secret for those who know me that I'm not a fan of the Ouija board. Not because of the 1970s media-induced demonising, but simply because I think a Ouija board is a bit of wood, paper or plastic with writing on it. To my mind, there's nothing paranormal about the board, and I think the Ouija's power, for want of a better word, simply comes from the psychological belief in it by the individuals using it. To begin with, a glass was used as a planchette, with the group members lying a single finger on the glass nailed down. Nothing occurred, but at one point I shifted from one foot to the other and the floorboard beneath my foot popped. I said that the noise was me moving, but the group decided that the sound hadn't come from me, but instead from the doorway area at the opposite side of the room. With nothing occurring, one of the attendees then suggested changing to a different board, one which they brought with them. This was quickly set up, and the same group set to work. Now, I'm not saying that any of the group deliberately moved the planchette, but in this case only two of the board users kept their fingers nailed down, with the others angling their fingers onto the planchette, which would instantly allow enough finger traction to move it, even unconsciously. To me, what I saw was the results of the ideomotor effect, where the users in question moved the planchette unconsciously through micro muscle impulses. As an objective observer, armed with an overhead video camera, this was proven when the planchette was essentially pulled off the board more than once and hastily repositioned by the same finger. Again though, as an entertainment piece, the Ouija did exactly as it was meant to, with those attending coming off the board thinking they'd contacted spirits in the location, even if most of the information given made little sense on its own.
Come on, keep on.
Is that a door squeaking over
Are you tuning?
A-O-F-A.
there? F again? Off. Or
Offaf.
Or just of space.
Of.
A-F.
Yes.
Yes, it's called Offaf.
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 Yeah.
Is your name Offaf?
Are you finished writing or would you like
Go,
to keep going?
can you go back to
Take it
centre,
back to the
please?
centre, please.
Go back to centre.
Our next vigil was in the Masonic Temple itself. The team supervisor suggested using REM pods, trigger objects and K2 EMF meters. For those listening that don't know what these are, REM pods are electronic devices set with audio and lighting and generate their own low-level electromagnetic field. The instrument apparently detects any electromagnetic disruption of the field, with its use as a ghost hunting tool purely based on the claim that ghosts produce or can manipulate electromagnetic fields. So the premise is that Casper approaches the REM pod, disrupts the field and produces an audio alarm or gets the unit's lights flashing. Now the K2 meter is actually just a safe level electromagnetic meter originally used for domestic household detection in America. Basically, it's designed to pick up surges in electricity supplies and routes, with a sensitivity that also picks up on radio signals and similar, which of course in modern East End Sunderland you just can't escape from. There's also of course the issue that as ghosts have never been scientifically proven to even exist, having a meter designed to detect them is just a false assertion. On a side note though, I have nearly finished an entire podcast episode looking into the myth behind EMF meters and the paranormal, which I hope to include in this investigation series down the line. Anyway, back to the vigil. We were asked not to film most of that particular vigil, but I did record it all on a dictaphone set up and placed on the lodge secretary's desk. At one point the dowsing rods were cracked out, but barring pops and crunches caused by the floorboards being walked on, and the REM pods going continuously crazy, which wasn't really a surprise due to their proximity to certain electronic fixtures and fittings, the vigil went by uneventfully, though it did highlight how nicely sound travels when at one point the sound of a musical mobile phone notification or similar filtered through from the area next door. Next came a welcome coffee break. Then my group headed into the basement, and the team supervisor suggested that a ghost box was set up. A ghost box is essentially a deliberately broken radio, designed to constantly move through all of the available radio frequencies so you get a constant stream of words, music, static, and other unintelligible sounds. The theory is that the group or individual asks a question, that a spirit present can somehow be aware of the upcoming content of every radio station and manipulate which radio frequency the meter picks up on in order to spit out the correct word or noise to answer that question. You can probably guess from my description which side of the fence I fall on when it comes to this instrument. But again, it was fascinating to me to see the equipment's effect on those present, who had already been primed by talk of the witchcraft link in the timbers in the basement, as well as sightings of shadow figures. Outside there were occasional splatters of rain, so standing next to the two open street level vents, the occasional tap of the rain did translate to a hint of unknown tapping, and of course the airflow did translate to the feeling of someone, or something, touching your hair or skin when there was a very occasional gust. Those standing with their backs to the main vents also described a chill feeling. As expected, the ghost box began to spit out words and phrases that for the most part were gobbledygook. Listen carefully to this next clip to see what I mean.
We have got a portal as well, which we haven't done any experiments with this tonight, so I thought we could give this a go
What's that
if
then?
that's alright. So this scans through different radio frequencies,
So
but it'll never stop on anything, yeah, essentially. Yeah. Right. So when we're using this, we usually, the team, don't get involved with things, but whatever you hear, just let us know, just say, oh, did that say such and such? I get carried away and I do see things, right, because this is probably my favourite bit of kit when I go as well. So we'll see what happens, we'll see if we get any hits, but if not, we've got plenty that we can do and we can switch things up. Okay, if you guys catch any spirits or anything strange on it.
Cover of an opposing viewpoint and we...
Are we going dark?
we'll try a little bit in the dark first. Is that alright?
Does it? Conservative light. And we were late.
Ever see that?
Jesus Christ. It's definitely interference on it somewhere.
I think this is probably the eeriest place I've been down here. I don't like it. I'm staying, but I don't like it.
So, Victoria, do you want to do one by yourself down here?
I don't think I could.
What about a body bag?
I mean, I'll try, but
Is this a bloody spirit box or a theremin? That's what it sounds like, doesn't it? You know,
I'll try, but I'm not
Fingerless
ready.
instrument things.
Just try to tune it differently, see if we can
Use the box, tell me your name, please.
Okay.
There was a push within the group's discussion surrounding the witchcraft link to the overhead timbers, which obviously I've already debunked earlier as late 18th century Baltic shipping marks and evidence of the European timber trade, so it was interesting again to see how questions on those lines, coupled with random noises and blurts from the ghost box, developed the story of the presence of 3 witches within the basement. It must be pointed out that the team supervisor did state on a number of occasions that there wasn't any previously identified links with witchcraft on any previous event in the hall, but the group I think had already formed the story in their heads. After a while we got the shout to move on, and we headed back out of the basement to the next location. The group headed upstairs into the committee room, where it was decided to first of all use a freestanding planchette, set with a vertical pencil, to see if the group could get anything present to write anything. When this proved a bust, the group supervisor decided to try a dual experiment, the Estes method coupled with spirit dice. Looking at the Estes method first, basically the experiment utilises one of the aforementioned ghost boxes, set to continuously scroll through incoming radio frequencies. In this experiment, however, the blurts and cheeps it emits are only audible to one person, sitting away from the rest of the group, essentially plugged into the box using headphones. For those interested, the name Estes comes from Estes Park in Colorado in the United States, so I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, where the method was first apparently used by researchers Pfeiffer and Randall. In some cases, blindfolds are often also used, and usually noise-cancelling headphones to prevent contamination and provide a mild sensory deprivation experience. So the idea during the vigil was that one group member would sit in a room adjacent to the committee room, plugged into the ghost box. He or she wouldn't be able to hear questions being asked by group members in the committee room, but would simply speak out whatever he or she heard, or could decipher from the ghost box. This was then repeated by one of the supervising team to the rest of the group. As well as this, the supervising team suggested using ghost dice in the main committee room. Ghost dice are essentially a set of dice, each marked with different letters. Think a Scrabble set in dice form. The theory is that you ask a question, throw the dice, then pick out words that the dice spell out. Now, as you'd expect, I'm more than somewhat sceptical when it comes to spirit dice. In a standard set there are 16 dice, and with 16 randomly rolled letters there are invariably going to be multiple words spelled out. But interpretation comes from what people want to see, so in many cases people will only pick out words that they deem to be relevant to the story or question at hand. There's also the issue of words recognised in the letters also being directly linked to the observer's knowledge of the English language, and also spelling ability level. In effect, the dice are simply a random word generator. The aim of the experiment was for those in the committee room to ask questions of any spirit present, roll the dice and see if there was an answer. Meanwhile, there was also the hope that the ghost box would also spit out answers to the same question, and that the two methods would correlate with each other. I'll state again for the record that I'm pretty much a complete skeptic when it comes to both of these methods, simply from the mechanics behind them. But I found it absolutely fascinating again how easily the human brain can pull together a story, especially when primed and prompted. The witchcraft theme in the story continued through the discussion, and as expected, for the most part, only words spelled out that fit into that theme were spotted and chosen. When the session ended, it was declared that there'd been lots of confirmation between the ghost box and the dice. But had there? For this, I'll let you make up your own mind.
Old man.
33 already before we've even asked a question.
33.
Oh, right, okay. So who wants to take the first roll of the dice?
I'll have a go at that.
Yeah? So if you just gather them in your
I've
hands.
never used the dice before.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Once everybody
Everybody
done a go.
rolling the dice.
So remember, don't start your question with can you.
1 night.
So let's just start
Everybody
with the
in
name.
one night.
One night.
It must be big something again.
Bingo.
That's right.
What would you,
Ready?
what would you like me to ask then?
Just say tell me
Just
your
ask
name.
whatever you
Tell
want.
me your name, anything
Try
like
a
that,
name.
or
Alright, well,
where did you live, how did you die?
Start with
Just say
me.
Start with tell me your
Say
name.
his
Yes.
name.
tell me your name.
See what it is.
60p.
60p.
There's no P's.
Definitely not 60 of them.
Message.
Do you wanna, after this, ask if it has a message for any of us?
Embassy.
I don't know what I can see.
Mick.
No, do you know what I can see? Big.
Oh, it's bloody, what's his name from down there?
John
again?
Said what?
To me, as you pointed that
To
out.
me.
Yeah.
Mick is there, yeah, so we've got the name Mick.
What's that?
Jowly.
Jowly.
Not Charlie.
How effective do you think this is? Like, have you had good results from this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Can
have?
I just roll this one again, please?
Yeah.
Have you seen the film
just-
Insidious?
Just to give you an
Yeah.
idea.
Well, Insidious
Last-
2,
Uh-huh.
you use the dice.
Have you seen the film Blackwell Ghost?
Yes. Oh my god, yes.
Yes, that where they use the Scrabble
It's good to
pieces.
get it again, because probability probably will
Yeah,
get
well-
made.
Have
But
you
if we
seen
get it
all
twice,
8 of them?
then-
Exactly.
Oh, haven't seen
Yeah.
number 8, but we've seen all the rest.
Oh,
of
they're
them.
amazing.
Yeah. We
Ready?
thought it was real.
I know,
Right.
I know.
We got so kid.
Mick, if that's you, can you spell your name out
Oh,
again,
wait,
please?
See, can you?
Come on, Mick. What did you ask?
Stab.
If it's Mick,
Ask
can
for
you
the
spell
name
his name
again.
again?
M-I, we've got a C.
We've got a C,
we
but not a
haven't
K.
We've
No.
got the H because you had Mitch, didn't you?
Yes, I saw that last time as well.
I was thinking if it spelled out Michael.
I was going to look for Michael. Yeah.
Mike.
There's
George,
no
eh?
T for me.
Mike has a religious
No.
name, isn't it?
Oh, no, we've got
Mika,
E.
Mike.
After that, do you want to ask if it has a message for us? Because we got message next door.
Nightclub.
Right, so
What was
How-
that banging?
someone
How did you die?
Oh.
Not
I mean, stabs there.
there was like a
Is it?
metal, like,
Is it really?
S-T-E.
We've got stab,
Loud.
guys. We've got stab.
Oh, it's a guest.
We've got stab.
Stab. On.
So you've got stab, on.
Agree.
Door.
You've got cut.
England.
Cut and stab.
Yeah.
Guest knows.
You've got beat as
Killed
well.
by Ted. There you go.
Ask where were you stabbed? Spirit, if you can tell Andrew the same answer, please. That was
So this is
great.
no different to the Ouija board, is it?
Not
It's
really,
no
no.
different.
Yeah, very
And yet
similar.
nobody's scared of that. And a lot of people
That's what
are
I
scared of the
say.
spirit
All the
board.
blood.
Yeah.
It says.
You know what we in the main hall?
No, it was in the basement.
In the basement, what do we get?
all the
all the
blood,
blood.
wasn't it?
E.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Right, if you were stabbed, spell out where.
Tail.
England.
We always get
Well,
rude
where?
stuff
Where were
up
you
here.
stabbed? England. You
Well,
weren't
yeah.
specific. You didn't
That's the
say
second
what part
time
of
it said
the body.
England now.
Yeah, it is.
Here.
Oh,
Or
you've got-
ear.
not- you've not got T.
No T,
There's
no.
also ear.
Together.
Yeah.
Cut his ear off, maybe.
Outsmart a bit.
It's not Van Gogh, is it?
No, but that's interesting. You said where were you stabbed?
said
Mhm.
England.
You weren't specific, like where on the body were you stabbed?
Yeah.
Well, let's go with that then.
Yeah.
England. Ask.
Tell Andrew
Whereabouts
where
in
on the
England?
body you were stabbed, please, and then
T.
spell it for us here.
No, there isn't, is there?
Ask where on the body you were stabbed. Let's see what we get for that.
I'm just looking at the photo.
Where on the body were you stabbed?
A witch.
Oh,
Witch?
that witch was
Yeah, good.
Again.
Never had a name about witches either.
No.
Ever. And that's downstairs. I'm looking for that witch.
Uh-huh.
Isn't there some related anything with a witch in here?
No, we've never had any.
Never had
It is,
with a
man.
witch in here.
There definitely is. There's a piece of the board that's in the basement was used to hang witches.
It's yours.
We used to hang witches.
It wasn't. We didn't hang they didn't hang
Boards-
witches here.
boards came from
Yeah.
the ships, didn't they?
But the hair part of there's a piece of wood from the ship that's used downstairs somewhere that was used on the boat to hang witches or something like that. Ask
I've
Richard.
never heard that before.
Ribs. No.
Yeah, that's a good
Ribs.
spot actually.
Ribs,
I've
yeah.
never seen that one. Stabbed in the ribs.
Yeah, if it's in the ribs, they'll be going through the heart now. So
Richard, I'll tell you about the witch connection.
Plain.
Why don't we try who stabbed you?
Yeah.
Did we get a name for this person?
No. Mick.
We have Mick already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mick.
Possibly.
Mick on Mick.
It didn't confirm it a second time though.
Do you know the name of the person who stabbed you?
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Tom.
It's neither,
There's a
neither
Tom
yes
there.
or no, is there?
No.
One.
Me.
19.
Oh, I get a date there.
Lots of numbers.
33.19. What else?
60p before.
60p.
There was another one, I forgot what it was now.
Maybe it's the lottery coming through.
Just keep it vague, like Elliot said before. Just say, what's your message for us?
Disgusting.
What's your message for us?
Did they talk about disgusting? I'd be surprised.
Cheese.
What's that? Oh.
Charlie.
I was going to say, I can see Charles.
UK.
Charles.
And then the
Check
UK.
that out.
Well, Charles' portrait's downstairs, isn't it?
Is it?
Yep.
Yeah, King Charles.
Yeah, and the Mason.
Oh,
fire.
right, okay.
There you go. Charles.
Danny.
And there's tail. We had tail.
okay.
He shouted tail out, didn't he?
Dad, on ones
Was
previous,
Charlie, what would be
do you usually get rude stuff up here?
Sometimes.
Because 2 times I've been here, it's been rude stuff up here.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
Is that common, is
Keep
it?
away.
Keep away. Who needs to keep away?
Standing.
Ooh.
Oh, I thought you said
One of you.
Stanley.
Resident.
Is that one of you 3 then who are standing?
Could you tell us your name again, please?
Dad.
He keeps like flinching. I don't know if something's touching him.
Let's see here.
Charles is there again.
Charles again.
Wow, is
Is
it?
it?
Yeah.
Is it?
That's good then, if we've got him twice.
He's just said rain and then afternoon.
There's that.
Charles again.
Is there?
Someone else wanting to have a go at this as well.
Just
then?
leave it at, yeah, we've got 3, but
Right.
let him go a couple more
Yeah,
minutes.
So,
let
so
people
like the
go.
same name.
Charles is
So
good.
twice
It's
in
like
this-
to get it twice in a
in a
row,
row.
isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
In rain as well could be like rain and.
And especially after you've asked.
Or
Yeah,
is it just
could be.
answering the question again when we say who you stabbed? Is it by Charles?
Oh.
Was it Charles that killed you? Did Charles stab you?
What's left? I doubt he was a DJ, like.
By Charles the DJ.
With the bagpipes.
He was killed in a nightclub. It came up.
Did you know?
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Came out, drifted out.
That's brilliant.
And I know it seems recent, but we did get 2013 on the Ouija board, didn't we?
Were you killed by a drifter?
Downstairs.
That was Des. Yeah, was that not Des? Somebody Des?
No.
No?
Oh, I was saying there was a
Des
no
died
on
in
there.
2013.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Right, let's ask.
Home.
Hang on.
Hang on, is human there?
Humans there.
Yep.
Contract.
Human contract, that's witchy.
There's it here.
There's the hair as well.
Yeah.
This is really good.
Mm.
Grave.
Human grave.
Which is exactly what we were doing in the temple.
That's what we were doing, yeah.
Temple.
This is why we love the
This is really
This is
good.
great dice. It's my favourite piece of equipment.
Was that an A before? I
That
don't
was
know
a
if I
T.
knocked that. Was it? Okay,
Mother.
sorry. Mother? Is that there?
No.
Are you sure?
Is
Yeah.
there MOTHER?
Oh,
Nice, yeah.
God bless.
Wow.
Ask who's in the grave.
Have we got hungry as well? No why, sorry.
Ask who's in the grave.
We can maybe find out who the bones are. We can try that.
I wonder if this is them. Do you know who they are?
Nah, nobody knows. Do you want to ask if we're speaking to the owner of the bones? I don't know how to word that. Not the owner of the bones, but like who it was.
Whose skeleton is
His
downstairs?
skeleton,
yeah. Ask.
Whose bones?
Yeah.
Is
Who
this
do
your
they-
skeleton?
No, that's only yes or no,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Ask who.
Whose bones?
Yeah.
Do these bones belong to you?
That's
or
only
no,
yes or
isn't
no,
it?
though.
Well,
isn't
it
it?
could spell yes, couldn't it?
Just say who owns the bones. Or
Yeah.
Who owns the skull downstairs?
you might actually get the Masons, I guess, because they're the
You
owners.
couldn't you?
Plastic.
Plastic, it's not plastic, like.
No. It's bone.
East wing.
This building doesn't have an east
Sometime.
wing, does it? Is it spelled bones?
Yeah.
Bones. This is really good, this.
Bones could
Change.
or rot.
Bones could change.
Best.
Oh, you got bones could rot.
Better.
No.
No.
If we use an O from there, we
Stop.
could.
Scott or stopped.
Stopped, I think.
Oh,
it said.
stopped.
Stopped. Italy.
Getting a lot of countries.
A lot of numbers.
To be
I think.
fair, it's from radio and the Euros are on at the minute.
Yeah, they are.
You know what I mean?
Ask, what do you want to tell us?
Yeah.
Just let them have the opportunity rather than answering our questions
Yeah.
to see what they want to come through with.
Open
And
them.
then we'll ask this one and then I think we'll swap over it.
What do you want to tell us?
I think he's just said Ants Cave.
Ants cave.
Something cave.
We had cave on here.
Did we?
Cave out earlier.
Help.
Please.
Wow.
Oh God, have you got please help?
It's around now, isn't it?
Landscape.
Landscape.
Dead.
Where's the L?
It's on
Same
the house.
Same one, yeah.
Break in.
Is there a second P as well?
No.
No. And there's only one. Oh no, there is two E's.
Spy.
No, there's no N, is there? No.
Voice.
Put please together and then let's see what's left.
Yeah. Was that you tapping the chair?
It's no, it's
The floor.
Floor
Okay.
just under us, yeah.
More.
Please here.
Mm-hmm.
Jewel.
Please hear the jewel.
Mm.
So we've had
The
a
trio's
jewel
gone
and a
down to
trio.
the jewel.
What happened to one of them?
Mother.
Again.
So what happened to one of them? Was
Afraid.
Please heard. Heard, please.
Supposed to be heard.
George.
Or also totally different angle.
Oh, please.
Is that the same spelling as heard as in like herd and sheep?
Yeah.
Yeah.
H-E-R-T.
Oh,
No.
teacher, yeah.
Well,
Without the
yeah.
Nearby.
I'm thinking like a command from a farmer or something.
Do you wanna
Can you
swap
please go
over?
herd the sheep?
People
now
now.
swap over. Who's going in next?
I'll let you go next.
Victoria, do you want
Yeah.
to try? Do you want me to do the setup this time?
Yeah.
I
I know, right? I don't think he's going to be that close.
Somebody else want to try with the dice? Swap
I
around the
might
dice
try.
as
I
well.
don't think
go on
I've
then.
done the dice before.
Go on then.
Yeah, we'll wait till they get set up next door and then we'll swap the questions. See if we can get some good answers.
Eh?
Headache.
I've got a bit of a headache.
Okay.
It's very
Probably not
boring,
like
yeah.
paranormally. I
Yeah,
do just get headaches.
It's when you get the paranormal hangover the next day.
I know. Got some interesting answers there.
Yeah, a lot of things we were getting the same as what you
Yeah.
were getting.
We'd hear what you said and then realise we can spell it out with the dice in here.
Right. Quite a lot of things.
So, to conclude this first investigative episode, For me, the visit to Queen Street Masonic Hall, Sunderland, was a fascinating experience. The history of the Grade 1 listed building, the oldest surviving purpose-built Masonic Hall still in active use by Freemasons in Britain, was a draw in itself. And as you walk around the exterior of the building, you can see the multiple phases of stone and brickwork that make it into the building we see today. The rare glimpse into Masonic Temple itself, with its rich culture, was also a draw to the place, not to mention, of course, the rapidly building modern folklore and ghost lore developing within its walls. When it comes to the haunting, I'll reiterate what I said before. Unless you experience the phenomena yourself, you can't truly debunk or confirm the events. I've explained my thoughts and theories on the phenomena in question, but why not book yourself on one of the many events booked at the hall and see for yourself? Ultimately, these paranormal events all go towards supporting the Queen Street Heritage Trust, which was formed to preserve the fabric of the building and maintain it for future generations to use and enjoy. So, until next time, stay safe and have a good week.